Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. We're going to start with a few opening prayers. There's a link to the prayers in the video description if you're on YouTube. If you're on tara.org watching this, you can click the video to go to YouTube and look in the description for the prayers. This first prayer we're going to do 3 times, and then the following prayers we'll do 1 time each. Organ yugi numjan sam pemage sa dombola yatsen chogi ngorube pemajung ne jesura kordu kandro mangpo kor ketki jesu da drupki jinji lop chia sheksu so guru pema city home. Organ yugi numjan sam pemage sa dombola yatsen chogi ngorupne pemajung ne jesurak kordu kandro mangpo kor ketki jesu da drupki jinji lop chia sheksu so guru pema city home. Organ yugi numjan sam pemage sa dompola yatsen chogi ngorupne pemajung ne jesurak kordu kandro mangpo kor ketki jesu da drupki jinji lop chia sheksu so guru pema city home. Kunsan dosem garab shiri sing pema kara jebani shunga sozo numna tatan katsa so kate lama namla so wadem. Ogmen chuki yinki pojana dusum sange kungi ngawonit rangsem chuku ngunsum tonse pe tawe lama namla so wadem. Sashi pochu chuching me to cham ri rabling shi ni de kempadi sange zing du mig de po wahi droku nam da jing la chu pa shok tram guru ratna mandala putsa mega samudra saparana samaya hum. Semchen namki sampadang loi je jitawar je chon to monte pai chuki korlo kordu som. Today I want to talk about compassion. Compassion is a foundational thought that occurs again and again in the Buddha's teaching. Western ideas surrounding the concept of suffering are different from Eastern ideas, and because of this, Westerners define compassion differently than Easterners. From a Westerner's point of view, we tend to think of compassion as meaning you feel sorry for someone. We tend to understand compassion on a relatively superficial and ordinary level. So if I tell you that someone is a compassionate person, you might think, oh, they're probably kind. They probably speak nicely. Maybe they feed hungry people. Maybe they volunteer at a soup kitchen. They probably put out birdseed for the birds or adopt shelter animals. Something like that. But if you've been schooled in Buddhist thought, then when you hear compassion or bodhicitta, all of these levels of understanding occur within the mind simultaneously, and a more profound understanding takes place. Jetsama Akanlamo said, "Although as Westerners we might think it would be valuable to be compassionate, if we understood the full implications of compassion on the many different levels that it exists, we would think compassion is not only desirable, but essential. There is no life without compassion." She says that if we do not understand compassion as being essential, we have the potential at any given moment to choose to be compassionate or not. We can fall into being not compassionate. We can accidentally forget to be compassionate. All these different things can happen. You know that this is true. If you look at your life, if you remember and are mindful, you sometimes do a fairly good job. Then if you go into your natural habits or become tired, have indigestion or PMS or whatever, you may forget and not be mindful of compassion. Something I've been thinking about a lot lately is how when we see a terrible story on the news, our first response is not compassion, but judgment. Even though it seems like our immediate response may be to care deeply about the situation in front of us, before that happens, we first choose which side we're on and which parties involved deserve our compassion. For instance, when someone is killed by the police, the way you respond depends upon your judgment of the person killed. And perhaps your prevailing feelings toward police or toward the community that person is from. So when these stories come up in the news, do you notice the way that you are more saddened by one murder than another? You say, okay, this man volunteered and he went to church and he ate dinner with his grandma every Sunday and he had just been accepted to Yale, and what a tragedy, his life was cut short. And then you see another story, similar circumstances, another man shot by police, but this guy doesn't seem quite as squeaky clean. Maybe he had some drugs on him, or maybe he had a record or a prior offense. And so you respond differently. You might wonder if he deserved what he got. But so what if he was a criminal? So what if he was on drugs? So what if he was anything that he was? Does he not deserve your love? Or perhaps you pray for the victims of crimes, but never the perpetrators. You might see photos of poachers with their dead elephants and rhinos, and your heart goes out to the animal, but not the killer. That guy's bad news. I can't believe he did that. Like, what a horrible human being that he could do this to this animal. You know, you choose a side. But doesn't the perpetrator, trapped by habit in a cycle of suffering, deserve your compassion too? He is going to suffer the consequences of killing that animal for lifetimes to come. He will suffer far more greatly than the animal did in their moment of death. Especially when you think about the way that our habits cause us to have more negative actions. So it isn't just that he killed this one time. This one killing is indicative of a habit of violence in his mind. And so he is likely to perpetrate violence again and again, creating even more suffering for himself in the future. So this poacher is now we know this poacher is going to suffer terribly when we see this. It's not just the elephant who he killed that is suffering, but he doesn't even know the suffering that he's going to experience. Compassion shouldn't be a choice, but most of the time it is. All the time we are choosing whether someone deserves our kindness. When we see someone suffering or someone comes to us for help, we look in our change purse to see how many coins of compassion we can spare. Can you spare a nickel of compassion for the starving children in Yemen? No, you only have a penny? You left your compassion in your other coat? We're so stingy. We think we will run out of love because we don't recognize its boundless nature. Donald Trump famously said that he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and wouldn't lose voters. And I believe him. I think this very well may be true because we all are incredibly biased. we do this all the time in our lives. There are some people who we love no matter what, and there are others who no matter what they do, we won't love. We just won't love them. And then there are others who we love conditionally, if their behavior pleases us and fits in our little box of acceptability. But that isn't really love, is it? That is probably more like convenience or comfort or objectification of their companionship. We are attached to them. We're attached to our idea of them. There are people in our lives who really could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and we would still love them. We would visit them in prison. We would mail them letters. Have you ever found out that someone you love has done something terrible? Maybe they lied, or maybe they lied to you or to someone else. Maybe they molested children. Maybe they killed someone while driving drunk. Maybe the worst part is that they refuse to show remorse. Maybe you feel like you could love them if they'd only show remorse. Maybe they're still actively harming others, still abusing their power or embezzling or hitting their kids, and yet you love them anyway. You worry about them when they're sick. You want them to be happy. Do you have anyone like that in your life? No matter what they do, you know you just can't stop loving them. And there are some beings who are really tough to love, like trolls in the comments section on the internet, or millipedes, or the neighbor's dog that barks all night, or the neighbor who leaves their dog outside to bark all night, or someone who prioritizes their own sense of personal freedom over the lives of others, who goes out in public without a mask even though they've tested positive for coronavirus, even though they are exposing others to a potentially fatal disease. A person who perhaps actively thwarts efforts to protect their community by refusing to help with contact tracing efforts, or who spits in the face of someone who asks them to put on a mask or asks them to step a few feet back. It's difficult to love someone when they refuse to see the harm they are actively causing. It's difficult to feel compassion for people who infuriate you. I'm sure we can all think of someone like this, someone who just irks you, who just makes your blood boil. I bet you can think of way more than one. How do we grow our compassion to encompass all beings, including those we find stupid, infuriating, hateful, ungrateful, despicable, and even downright evil? How do we strengthen our compassion so that it shines without discrimination, without judgment, without choice? Jetsama Akanlamo says, if we had a deeper understanding of compassion, it would be part of our foundation and there would be no choice. In the same way that there's no choice about breathing. You would never think, well, I'm in a good mood, I guess I'll breathe. Or, well, breathing's okay now because I'm relaxed. Or, I can manage that now. That doesn't happen because you know that to breathe is to live. If we understood that compassion is as much a part of our being and as essential to our existence as breathing, then there would be less choice about it. It would be more naturally and gracefully part of our mind state. In order for that to happen, we have to understand what compassion really means, and we have to understand the nature of suffering. So compassion is not just feeling sorry for someone. And compassion is not just being attached to someone. The way that we love others is often so superficial. And it usually has more to do with our own happiness. We're attached to the idea of this person in our life. We're attached to the happiness they bring us. Compassion is not just feeling sorry for someone, though. In the Buddhist tradition, we talk about compassion in a different way. The fully awakened mind of compassion is the same and not different from the mind of enlightenment. Jetsuma says, "You cannot achieve enlightenment without developing the mind of compassion. You cannot achieve compassion, true compassion, selfless compassion, without moving ever closer to the mind of enlightenment. Essentially, they are the same." So in our language, we have two different words. We have the word compassion and we have the word enlightenment. But from the Buddhist perspective, the word bodhicitta encompasses them both. When you say bodhicitta, you mean compassion and you also mean enlightenment. Compassion and enlightenment can never be separated. It's impossible to separate them. By studying the suffering of all beings, we develop both our compassion and our wisdom, because we're coming to understand the nature of samsara, the nature of cyclic existence, the suffering that traps us all. So by studying the suffering of all beings, developing our compassion, developing our wisdom, we move closer to enlightenment. Why do we want to attain enlightenment? Not because we want to be someone who is enlightened, because we really want to get the gold star on our resume or something. We want to become enlightened because it's the only way that we can truly be of benefit to others and relieve their suffering. You can think to yourself, how do people suffer? How do sentient beings suffer? Sentient beings of all kinds, not just people. And not just the sentient beings that we can perceive, not just humans and animals and bugs, but even non-physical sentient beings. The Buddha has many teachings on the non-physical realms, but you might start with the ones that you know, human beings and animals. You should look up different life forms and different conditions around the world. We have the internet, it's very easy. You don't even have to go to the library to look this up. You can just get on Google, ask Alexa. Ask Alexa to tell you all about different cultures and different ways that people live. You can watch National Geographic or other nature shows and see all about different animals and different life forms, how they grow, how they evolve, from the little beings that live in the thermal vents to giant blue whales to giraffes. Study them all carefully. And you'll see that animals are consumed. They eat other beings until they're eaten themselves. And you'll see that human beings grow sick, they grow old, they die. And you'll also see that despite all of this suffering, and despite many people searching in vain for the fountain of youth or the best anti-aging cream on the planet, or no matter how many nonprofits there are dedicated to the eradication of each and every single sub-suffering there is, no one has proven they can keep us from growing sick or from aging or from dying. And even within those three sufferings, there are so many different kinds of sufferings and sub-sufferings. Jetsuma says, while you are studying all of these things, develop a deep sense of compassion for the endlessness of it, compassion for the lack of resolution, and that everything around you will have its moment of intense suffering, everything and everyone. Develop a deep sense of compassion, that their suffering is endless, that it is unbearable at times, and that there is yet no solution. Think for yourself, what could be the possible solution? Try to think one up. Really work that through, down to the place where you're in the planning stages. You will find it will never work, because we are all filled with the karma of desire, every one of us. Having decided for yourself that all sentient beings are suffering so greatly that you can no longer bear it, and having understood that there is nothing else but to end this suffering, then maybe you might also think there's no other way to spend your life than to accomplish that for yourself and sentient beings. Because the only way you can truly benefit beings is if you yourself have achieved some realization and understanding of the causes of their suffering. Having understood all these things, then you must determine for yourself how you will spend the rest of your life. You must determine this, and it will take every day of your life because we've been trained to do the opposite. You must think for yourself again and again and again of what use is this life. If I am constantly filled with more suffering, if I am constantly participating in a scenario that always ends up with suffering, how will this life be of any value? And if you come to the solution that this life has value, if it is a vehicle for enlightenment, then you should think for yourself, how do I do this? You should examine what you do now, how you spend your day. Then you should think, how have I spent my years? Then you should think, what should I do? It is so important also to contemplate the causes of suffering, to see that we are no different from everyone else that is causing suffering. We have the same obscurations in our mind streams as everyone else. We have hatred, we have greed, we have ignorance, we have pride, we have desire. We're consumed by them, and we're intoxicated by them, and we, drunk on them, we act in terrible ways and hurt other beings and hurt ourselves constantly. So we need to contemplate these sufferings and the causes of sufferings and develop real compassion for all beings, including ourselves, who are trapped in this cycle of suffering, drunk on all of these, drunk on desire and hatred and ignorance. It's important to do this because one of the reasons it's important to do this is that our lack of compassion also inhibits our own growth. When we are unable to hold wrongdoing within the space of compassion, then we become afraid to admit when we've done wrong. We become afraid to face it, afraid that no one will love us now. We become afraid because we don't know how to love wrongdoers ourselves. So we don't know how to love ourselves when we've done wrong. So when we harm others, we try to sweep it under the rug. We are afraid that we will face the same cold-hearted, punitive judgment that we have toward others. We must expand our compassion to include the misguided actions of sentient beings, the same way a psychiatrist's compassion would include the delusional thinking of his patient. In truth, we are all delusional. We're all locked in this psych ward called samsara, the cycle of existence. And here we are squabbling amongst ourselves, pointing fingers and saying, you're crazier than I am. You don't deserve compassion. But really, we're all delusional. We have all made terrible decisions in the past many, many, many times, which is why we're stuck here. It's the prerequisite to be here. If you're in samsara, you messed up. You can't point your fingers at someone else and say, they messed up, they don't deserve my compassion. If you are here, you can pinch yourself. Are you here in your body? Are you in samsara? Then it's because you also have these obscurations within your mind. You also have created the causes of suffering. We are no different than anyone else. We are no better than anyone else. We tend to judge others like, I was thinking the other day, if you think of back in the days when we used to go to the store, the grocery store or the coffee shop, they have the newspapers out on the racks. And, you see the front page of USA Today, you see the front page of the New York Times, the front page of the Washington Post, and you just see that the top half of that front page, right? You don't see anything below the fold. You don't know what else is in the rest of that newspaper. All of us are walking around with our thick newspapers of all the karma that we've accumulated. If you imagine that all of your karma is printed on a newspaper, a very thick newspaper. But we only see what's above the fold on the top page. That front page, top headline, that's all we see. We can only see what is appearing in our life right now. We can only see the wealth that we've accumulated in our past lives that is appearing in this life. We can only see the sickness that we've accumulated in past lives that is ripening now. We cannot see the stuff that is yet to ripen. We can't see all of the causes that we created in our past lives and all of the future suffering that lays before us. We also can't see the causes of what brought us here to this path and to this opportunity to escape the cycle of suffering. All that we can see in our diluted, limited perception are the front headlines in our newspaper of just what's ripening in our life right now. And we look at everyone else's newspapers and we judge them by their headlines too. But none of us knows what lies below the fold. None of us knows if we also committed horrific abuses of power in a past life. Or if in a past life we, colonized a country and wiped out indigenous inhabitants. Or if we led someone down a wrong spiritual path and turned people in a wrong direction. Or if we slaughtered millions of animals, or if we, lied and embezzled or anything. Like, we don't know what we did in these past lives, but we so easily render judgment based on this moment in time of what karma we see ripening in ourselves versus what is ripening in others. And it's so superficial to judge people like that. It's just a moment in time. You have no idea when your newspaper page is going to flip and when you're going to be in the same position that they are. We have to expand our love to include wrongdoers because we are going to make lots and lots of mistakes, and so will everyone around us. Terrible, awful, hurtful mistakes, and we will experience the karmic consequences of them. That means that in our next life, depending on our actions, we or someone that we love could be the millipede that disgusts us. Someone that we dearly love in this life could be our enemy or our dinner in the next. And the beings who are our enemies and our dinners now were once our beloved companions or our own dear children. Our love is so conditional and biased that even when we talk about unconditional love, we think too small. If your love cannot accompany someone to the depths of hell, then it is not unconditional. And if our love doesn't stretch to hell or to the end of space, then how will we generate compassion in our next lives when we find ourselves in an unfortunate rebirth in one of these places? There is a story of the Buddha in his past lives before he was the Buddha. The Buddha had a past life in which he was born in hell. And this was where his spiritual journey began. This is really where he began on the path to enlightenment. It's from square one. He was in hell. And he was strapped to a cart, like how oxen pull a cart. He and another man were strapped to a cart and forced to pull it. And these hell beings are there whipping them and punishing them and forcing them to carry this cart forward. And the man next to him was suffering terribly, and he could see that. And he begged that he could take that man's suffering onto himself. He said, "Let me pull the cart. This man has suffered enough. Let me pull the cart. Let me suffer for this man." And he had compassion for this person suffering next to him. And so at that moment, then he was taken out of the hell, or he moved out of the hell realms and moved into his next life, and he continued on his spiritual path. But starting from that moment, starting from the depths of hell, turning to someone who's in hell. He did something that deserves being in hell. He turns to this guy. He doesn't say, oh, this guy was probably a murderer. He probably did worse than I did. I don't want to help this guy. He probably deserves to be in hell, unlike me, who doesn't, or something. He didn't have this judgment in this moment. He just looked and he saw suffering, and he responded to it honestly. May I take his suffering on? May I bear his load? And I wonder, if we were reborn in the hell realms, would we be able to do the same? Or would we say that guy probably deserves to be in hell? He's probably a Nazi. That guy probably, I don't know, what's worse than being a Nazi? I don't know. You probably think, like, oh, that guy deserves to be there. I don't want to help him. And I hope that's not the case. I hope we do just what the Buddha did and open our hearts to the suffering right in front of us, without judgment or qualification, without limit. No one should have to prove that they deserve compassion. They do. It doesn't matter what they've done with their life. It doesn't matter whether they've killed someone or they saved someone's life. It doesn't matter. They all deserve compassion. There is not a single being that doesn't deserve your compassion. There is not a single action that is heinous enough to excuse a being from your compassion. We so often try to say that there is. Well, he did something horrible. Well, she just murdered these people without even batting an eye. She's a villain, or this person. We really try to draw these lines in the sand, and there aren't. There's no line in the sand. No matter what deluded actions a being may commit, it does not diminish their worthiness as an object of your compassion, and it does not diminish their potential for enlightenment. It only adds to the karmic crud temporarily obscuring their Buddha nature, like a diamond covered in dirt. And we should be very sad when we see people heaping dirt on top of their Buddha nature diamonds. We all have this Buddha nature within us. And when we see people obscuring it further, we can feel sad about that. We can have compassion for them, but they don't know. They don't know that that diamond is in there, and they are just burying it so deep. They don't know that that's the only real wealth that they have. All sentient beings wish to be happy. Even murderers, even child molesters, even Nazis, everyone wants to be happy. But they suffer because they don't know how to create the causes of happiness. In their delusion, they take misguided actions. They try to seek happiness, but their actions are misguided, and so they create suffering. They bury that diamond in the dirt. But all sentient beings have the Buddha nature within them, and that means they have the potential to change. They have the potential to be liberated from suffering and to attain Buddhahood. The ants in your kitchen have the same potential as you do. Isn't that humbling? Everyone has the capacity to attain enlightenment. Everyone that you hate, everyone that has ever hurt you, everyone that you love, they all have the capacity to attain enlightenment. Not necessarily in their current life as a millipede or whatever, but ultimately they have the same potential. The Tinley Norbu Rinpoche says, first, Buddha nature manifests from the minds of all sentient beings. This means we can have faith that all sentient beings have the potential of enlightened mind. Second, this self-nature is not different from the nature of any other Buddhas and does not have smaller or larger qualities, lower or higher qualities, or any qualities that can be distinguished from the Buddhas. This means we can have faith that within every sentient being, including ourselves, there is the full potential of complete Buddhahood. Third, all sentient beings are lineage holders of the essence of the Buddhas. This means we can have faith that this lineage has no possessor and is held by every sentient being through inherent Buddha nature, which must only be acknowledged as already true. We must never lose faith in the Buddha nature of all beings, including our own Buddha nature. No matter what we do, no matter how much shame we may feel at points in our life, we must never lose faith in our own capacity for Buddhahood and in the capacity of others to attain Buddhahood. Tenli Norbu Rinpoche says that the only reason that the immeasurable qualities of the Buddhas are not apparent in sentient beings is that sentient beings are not manifesting Buddha nature's self-display due to the obscuration of their lack of faith. He gives the example that a sword has the power to cut, but this power is temporarily inconspicuous when the sword is in its sheath. If the sword is removed from its sheath, the power of its qualities become apparent. Similarly, when Buddha nature is recognized and used, sentient beings become the same as Buddha. And Tenli Norbu says, as Rigzin Jigmen Lingpa said in one of his prayers, whatever brings benefit to sentient beings brings benefit to the victorious ones. So therefore, as Buddha said, I myself and all sentient beings share the same suffering and happiness. Through this quality of the true nature of sublime beings, may you protect beings from sufferings. So I'd like to end our class with a contemplation and a meditation. So I'd like to start by doing first a short contemplation on suffering, and then we're going to do a short practice of Tonglen, the practice of sending and receiving. And at the end, we will say the dedication prayer, which is in the opening prayers book. It's on the last page. So for this contemplation on suffering, we're going to alternate periods of contemplation with periods of rest. During the contemplation, keep your mind gently focused on the topic. And when you rest your mind, just leave it alone. Just let it be. Chagda Tuku says, allowing the mind to rest is an effortless process that reveals an indwelling awareness, an awareness that is non-dual, not a subjective awareness of an object. So usually when people meditate, they try to do something. But instead of trying to do something, we're just going to let the mind relax. At the points when I say rest your mind, we're just going to let the mind relax. Don't block it, don't follow it. Just let it be. We're allowing our mind to rest in the spontaneously open space in which thoughts arise and subside. So that means that all sorts of thoughts about the past or the future will naturally occur because you are residing in the spontaneously open space in which they do that, in which they arise and subside. But don't grasp at them. Don't follow them. Don't suppress them or push them away. Just let them be. I'm going to pull up my timer. Since we are meditating together, I'm going to, let's see, I have to turn on my internet apparently. Since we're all meditating together, I'm going to use a preset timer, but if you are practicing by yourself, then you can determine when it is time to move to the next step by watching your mind and being aware of when it becomes active or stagnant. Getting my timer ready. Sometimes technology is really great, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a little complicated. Okay, we're going to try this. We'll see how this goes. Okay, so we're going to begin this meditation by considering that no one throughout the realms of samsara is beyond suffering. All happiness is fleeting. Reflecting on your own life, examine whether the cause of your suffering lies in the poison of the mind. Even if you aren't miserable now, are you sowing seeds of future suffering? Have you already planted seeds that haven't yet borne fruit? Do these teachings seem relevant and true to you? And contemplate these things from different angles. You can contemplate this from different angles, thinking of different experiences in your life. And just think about how no one throughout all the realms of samsara is beyond suffering. What are the causes of suffering that you're creating? What causes of suffering have you already created? What causes of suffering do you see those around you creating? What will the result of those causes be? Just think about that. Okay. Trying to shorten this a little bit. Getting impatient waiting for me, it's really good because you should know that things don't always go the way you want them to, and we still have to be compassionate anyways. No, I don't. Okay. Ready. Let's go. Think of compassion. Think of suffering. Think of all of the sufferings that you and others are creating. Think about the causes that you create every day, the meals that you eat, the words that you speak, the thoughts that you think. What are the causes of suffering that you're creating? your mind rest. Just let it be. Now give rise to compassion for the countless beings that are caught in the web of suffering. And now let your mind rest again. Just let it be. Now formulate a commitment to do whatever you can to liberate sentient beings from this web of suffering. let the mind relax. Let it be. And now pray that the causes and conditions of suffering for all beings be completely eliminated. And again, let the mind rest. So you can do that contemplation yourself at any time. And you can just sit down on your cushion and spend 10 to 15 minutes doing that. You can spend longer too. And like I said before, it's best to, if you can, to do it by just watching your mind and noticing when your mind becomes, when you're trying to rest your mind and it becomes active, move back to the contemplation. And when you're contemplating and your mind gets stagnant, then rest your mind. And so you can just move through the cycles of this contemplation yourself at your own pace. Another method that we can use to develop our compassion is the practice of Tonglen, or sending and receiving. And Tonglen is done to develop our compassion and our ability to be present for our own suffering and the suffering of others. It trains us to use the energy of loving kindness to open our hearts to suffering and transform it into well-being. It asks us, the practice of Tonglen asks us to invite suffering into our being and let it break open the armor of our heart. So Chagdatuku says, we can also train the mind in order to develop the qualities that will enable us to act more selflessly, without hesitation or regret. An effective method for doing so is the meditation of taking and sending, Tonglen, in which we imagine that we absorb the suffering of others with each inhalation of our breath and send them our happiness with each exhalation. At first, fearing some harm may come to us, we may be reluctant to visualize drawing suffering into ourselves. But there is nothing to worry about if we practice with a good heart. Through the power of our selfless intention, we will begin to see ourselves as a vehicle for others' happiness. Any negativity will be resolved and our obscurations will be purified. With this meditation, we can antidote our anger and aversion and reduce our harmful thoughts and actions, exchanging them for compassionate and loving ones. This training helps us to build a stable foundation for developing generosity. If we practice strongly and diligently, we can eventually give rise to such selflessness that we wouldn't hesitate to offer whatever necessary to truly benefit another being. So, at first, it may be difficult to think about taking on all sentient beings suffering all at once. That may seem too overwhelming or too abstract, so instead we're going to start by envisioning one or two beings for whom you easily feel compassion, whose suffering particularly touches you. And contemplate their misery and put yourself in their place, imagining what their experience must be like. And for many of us, this person who's easy to feel compassion for, traditionally we start with a mother or father, with our parents. If you have a difficult relationship with your parents, then that's not the person to start with. It may be a loving aunt or a dog or your partner or your best friend or your child, whoever it is, that you find it just very easy to feel compassion for them. So contemplate their misery and put yourself in their place, imagining what their experience must be like. Let's just take a moment to arouse compassion. Now, with a fervent wish to relieve their suffering and secure their happiness, follow the natural rhythm of your breath. Visualize that as you inhale through your nose, you take in all of the causes and conditions of their suffering in the form of murky, dark light. Imagine they become completely free of misery. And with each exhalation, visualize that you are sending and they are receiving all of your positive and loving qualities and all conceivable sources of enduring happiness as radiant, pure light. So as you inhale, take in all of the causes and conditions of their suffering as murky, dark light. And as you exhale, send them all of your positive and loving qualities, all sources of enduring happiness. We're going to repeat this again. This time, I want you to visualize one or two people for whom you feel intense anger or aversion. People who you really feel averse to. Imagine one or two people like that. We're going to do the same thing. Inhale all of their suffering in the form of murky, dark light, all of the causes and conditions of their suffering come into us, and as we exhale, all of the causes for happiness, this radiant, pure light flow from us to them. Now I want you to expand your visualization to include all of those for whom you have similar feelings of aversion. Breathe in the causes and conditions of their suffering, this dark, murky light. And as you breathe out, imagine they receive all conceivable sources of enduring happiness as pure light. as your meditation deepens and your heart opens, you can gradually experience the scope, you can gradually increase the scope of your visualization to include larger and larger and larger groups of people until your loving kindness and compassion embraces all beings throughout existence. So I hope you will do both of these meditations on your own. I hope you will continue to practice these. Always, at the end of your practice, remember to dedicate the merit for the benefit of all beings. And so we will end with the dedication. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished, and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms. Thank you.